The Ashcroft family's monthly dinners were far less about cuisine and far more about financial showmanship. This evening at the expansive estate beyond Napa Valley, guaranteed to be particularly insufferable. I assumed my customary position near the hearth, silently watching while my relatives battled to determine who could boast the most loudly. Just purchased a ranch in Jackson Hole, Preston announced, swirling his wineglass. Right beside the gentleman who possesses half of Silicon Valley. Please, scoffed Cassandra, opening her designer purse with dramatic flair. We just finalized a vineyard in Tuscany, private Mediterranean access. You simply cannot assign a value to that caliber of vista. I concealed my grin behind my glass of iced tea. If only they understood. Nora, Aunt Evelyn's voice sliced sharply across the dining table, you've been remarkably silent. Preston leaned forward, his artificial sympathy evident. We were simply curious about your housing arrangement. And there it was. What about it? I concealed my smile behind my glass. I replied, placing down my drink. This confined duplex in Portland, he stated. Still leasing, correct? The one on Alder Street? Cassandra contributed, feigning astonishment. Didn't realize people our generation still rented. I almost chuckled. The Alder Street complex was my corporation's initial commercial purchase under West Pine Holdings. To them, I was a struggling renter. In truth, I was the proprietor. I appreciate the space, I responded steadily. You're 35, sweetheart, Evelyn added with a condescending smile. It's time to mature. Purchase something substantial. Substantial? Try a $1.8 billion portfolio of multifamily structures, commercial towers, and yes, Ashcroft Plaza, the very property where they assembled monthly. 6 months prior, I acquired it discreetly through a private equity division they'd never connect to me. I've managed adequately, I replied. Preston smirked. You cannot even afford a mortgage. I reclined and allowed them to continue speaking, because shortly the lease renewal would arrive at their desks, and they'd discover whose signature would appear on the letterhead. Dad finally looked up from his wineglass. Now, Preston. Not everyone's fortunate with your keen intuition. Nora selected her direction. Aunt Evelyn chimed in with a sigh, as if I'd let them down by not wedding a hedge fund executive or becoming a lifestyle influencer. They assumed I spent my days displaying cheap walk-ups to impoverished graduate students, barely surviving on commission payments. What they didn't realize was that Nora Hale, the family disappointment, was also West Pine Holdings, the anonymous company quietly acquiring commercial and residential properties throughout the Pacific Northwest for the past decade. Speaking of real estate, Cassandra interrupted with excitement in her eyes, have you heard about the Alder Street situation? Some company purchased the entire block. They're planning to demolish everything. She added with mock sympathy, guess that tiny apartment of yours will finally disappear. I maintained my neutral expression. I was the purchaser, and I had zero intention of demolishing anything. The Alder Street complex was a treasure. Brick facades, vintage details, and rent protections for families who'd resided there for decades. I was deep into a historically respectful renovation. Really? I asked. Hadn't heard. Well, naturally not, Preston smirked. Transactions that magnitude are far beyond your capabilities. If you get evicted, Evelyn said cheerfully, you can always relocate to the guest house. We'll assist you in finding something more respectable, maybe even someone respectable. I'm content, I stated flatly, and so is my landlord. Cassandra gave a strained laugh. You cannot live a modest life indefinitely, dear. Hail used to signify something in this state. It still did, just not how they imagined. In real estate circles, West Pine was equivalent to ethical expansion and tenant-first investing, the opposite of my cousin's flashy developments that demolished communities for recognition. Actually, Dad said, setting down his glass. This gathering's partially about business. The board's concerned about the new proprietor of Ashcroft Plaza. I tilted my head. West Pine Holdings acquired a majority interest 6 months ago, he explained. Nobody knows their identity. Possibly a foreign investor. Preston nodded. Has to be. These magnates adore legacy properties. If only they knew their feared mystery investor was sitting right here in a thrifted sweater and worn boots. And now, Dad continued, they're posing difficult questions, particularly about our accounting methods. Creative accounting, like how Preston borrowed from the building fund to finance his Jackson Hole retreat, or how Cassandra categorized her luxury handbags as client engagement expenses. I'm certain it's nothing serious, Aunt Evelyn said, her pearls trembling with anxiety. The Hale name still carries weight. That's exactly it, Dad interrupted. This West Pine individual doesn't appear impressed by names. They've demanded a complete audit. I observed the transformation ripple across their faces, panic tightly masked behind designer smiles. An audit would reveal more than questionable expenses. It would expose their entire scheme. Perhaps Nora could assist, Cassandra said suddenly, her tone sweet. She works in real estate, doesn't she? Maybe she knows someone at the management firm. They all turned to me simultaneously. Just like that, I was no longer an embarrassment. I was potentially valuable. I primarily work with smaller residential clients, I said smoothly. Nothing on Ashcroft Plaza's scale. For heaven's sake, Preston snapped. You cannot even help your own family. Mom gave him a cautionary look, but her silence spoke volumes. Even Dad was back to scrolling, uninterested in defending me. They had no concept how helpful I was about to become, just not in the manner they hoped. Tomorrow morning, West Pine Holdings would issue a public announcement. Effective immediately, Ashcroft Plaza would undergo major operational reform. No more shadow budgets, no more nepotistic contracts, no more treating the building like it was a family credit card. I glanced around the penthouse. Artwork purchased with maintenance funds, couches triple their listed cost, fixtures installed by Cassandra's husband's company with inflated invoices. Anyway, I said, rising and dusting off my jeans. Some of us have early mornings. Cassandra smirked. Off to show more rent-controlled studios? I slung my weathered leather bag over my shoulder. Inside were board briefings, legal documents, and renovation proposals worth more than anything in this room. No, Aunt Evelyn called sweetly. Next time, perhaps dress more like a Hale. Appearances matter. I smiled. Don't worry, I said. Tomorrow I'll look exactly like the Hales expect. They just didn't realize I was already the one controlling the show. The following morning, I stood in my actual office, an entire penthouse floor overlooking downtown Portland, and prepared for the moment I'd planned for over a year. My assistant, Isla, walked in briskly, placing a cappuccino beside my laptop. The Ashcroft Plaza board is already assembled, she said. Your family arrived early, attempting to charm the independent members. I smirked, imagining Preston and Cassandra working the room in desperation. Audit packets all printed and distributed. The forensic team discovered even more than anticipated. She paused. Are you certain you want to proceed with this? Once they know, there's no returning. They need to learn, I said quietly. That legacy isn't permission to abuse authority. I turned to the glass, catching my reflection. Gone were the jeans and sweater. Today, I wore a deep navy Altuzarra suit. Sharp lines, subtle strength. The kind of appearance Aunt Evelyn used to dream I'd wear to meet a husband. Instead, I'd wear it to dismantle their house of cards. The ownership announcement goes live in 20 minutes, Illa added. Once it's released, you'll be revealed. Then let's begin, I said, picking up my briefcase. The Ashcroft Plaza boardroom fell silent as I entered. My family was gathered at the far end, nervous, underdressed, and visibly shaken. "Who are you?" Preston demanded. "This is a private meeting." I calmly placed my briefcase at the head of the table. "I'm Nora Hale," I announced, founder and exclusive proprietor of West Pine Holdings, the corporation that possesses this structure and numerous others your family exploited illegally. Evelyn turned ghostly pale. Cassandra's mouth opened, but no words emerged. My father's grip tightened on his pen. "Nora," he whispered. I nodded. "Good morning." I opened the briefcase and began distributing audit reports across the table. "Shall we examine your finances?" "This is ridiculous," Preston stammered. "You're just... what?" I inquired. "The black sheep? The renter? The woman in thrift store clothing?" Cassandra blinked. "But you display apartments." "I work," I said simply. "And I constructed something genuine with integrity, not illusion." The board observed, astonished, as the proud Hale family began to crumble one document at a time. "These folders," I said, "contain comprehensive documentation of every misappropriated fund, inflated invoice, and fabricated receipt. Reports of financial irregularities involving Ashcroft Plaza's accounts." I began distributing the final documents. "Preston, would you care to clarify the $2 million in roof repairs that funded your Jackson Hole property?" He flushed so intensely I thought he might faint. "Or Cassandra," I continued, turning the next page. "Maybe you'd like to guide us through your husband's invoices charging triple the market rate for basic plumbing." "You'd expose your own family's secrets like this?" Aunt Evelyn gasped. "No," I said steadily. "You expose them. I'm just ensuring they get addressed." Dad finally spoke, voice low and imploring. "Nora, sweetheart, we can clarify." "Don't," I said, raising a hand. "I've observed this family treat our great-grandfather's legacy like a personal bank while you ridiculed my so-called modest lifestyle. I was constructing something superior based on principles, not pretense." "But why?" Cassandra asked, bewildered. "Why pretend to be struggling?" "I didn't pretend anything," I replied. "I lived simply. I invested prudently. You assumed wealth had to be ostentatious." "The Alder Street building," Preston said, stunned. "You actually reside there?" "I own it," I corrected. "And most of the block. And no, I'm not demolishing it because some of us care about people, not merely profits." Suddenly, phones around the table buzzed. One board member looked up, reading from his screen. "West Pine Holdings reveals CEO's identity. Nora Hale, an estranged member of the Hale family, confirmed as owner of $2 billion real estate portfolio." Cassandra fumbled her phone. "Ranked among top ethical developers," she muttered. "Historic preservation, tenant protections." "This will destroy us," Cassandra whispered, pale. "No," I said firmly. "This will rescue you from yourselves. Effective today, Ashcroft Plaza will operate transparently. No more shell games, no more preferential contracts." "And if we don't comply?" Preston tried to sound bold, but his voice wavered. I smiled. "Then I'll forward these reports to the authorities. I'm certain the IRS would find them illuminating." Silence deepened. "What do you want?" Dad finally asked. "I want you to remember what the Hale name represented before all this." I met their eyes individually. Great-grandfather built communities, not just profit margins. I stood, collecting my papers. "You have a choice. Work with me to restore that legacy," I said evenly, "or find somewhere else to reside. I hear there are some lovely rentals in Lake Oswego." I turned to leave. "Nora, wait." Dad's voice stopped me just as I reached the door. I was mistaken about you." "Yes," I replied quietly. "You were?" The aftermath unfolded like something from a business drama. The media couldn't get enough of the hidden heiress of Portland who'd quietly built a real estate empire and dismantled her family's illusions in one board meeting. Aunt Evelyn resigned from 3 local boards, too embarrassed to show her face. Cassandra's husband's firm collapsed within weeks of the audit release. But not all of it was bitter. Preston, finally facing genuine consequences, enrolled in a public university's real estate program. Cassandra began volunteering at a transitional housing shelter downtown. She told me later it gave her more fulfillment than her gallery openings ever had. And Dad? He asked to learn the business, not as a father reclaiming authority, but as a student. This time, he wanted to comprehend what I'd built. 6 months later, I was sitting in my Alder Street apartment. Yes, I kept it. Reviewing new quarterly reports. Ashcroft Plaza was flourishing. Leases were stable, tenant satisfaction was up, and small retailers on the ground floor were generating healthy profits. A knock interrupted my focus. I opened the door to find my mother. She wore jeans and no makeup. It took me a moment to process the casualness. "I got your invitation," she said, holding it up. "A courtyard holiday party." I nodded. "It's not quite your style." "No," she admitted, glancing around my modest space. "But I'm learning that maybe style isn't everything." She picked up a photo. Me at 23, beaming at my real estate license ceremony. "I never asked," she said. "Why this path?" "Because I wanted to construct something real," I replied. "Not just purchase it and display it." "And now," she murmured, "you control more than all of us." "I do," I nodded. "But control isn't the objective. Purpose is." She looked at me seriously. "Will you teach me?" "Come tonight," I said. "Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins." Later, I stood by my window watching lights sparkle across Portland, this city I'd quietly made mine. Ashcroft Plaza glowed in the distance, no longer a monument to greed but a symbol of restoration. Below me, the Alder Street building hummed with quiet life. Brickwork, original wood beams, and garden courtyards were preserved with care. My phone chimed with new messages: partnership offers, speaking invitations, acquisition deals. West Pine Holdings was in high demand now, but I kept my schedule manageable, my routine grounded. Success to me wasn't about overshadowing my past. It was about building something that mattered, something that would endure. Sometimes the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from. And sometimes the best kind of triumph doesn't roar, it endures. A week later, at the Alder Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain watching my family adapt to a world they once dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Lopez, a tenant here for 38 years, listening with genuine interest. Preston helped string lights with Mr. Keller, a World War II veteran and longest-term resident. Cassandra laughed beside a table of children icing sugar cookies. Slowly, they were learning real wealth isn't in what you can flaunt. It's in what you preserve, what you share, what you elevate. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. "You know," he said, "your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets." I nodded. I found his old ledgers, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We forgot that. He looked at me, not like a daughter who'd gone astray, but like someone who'd carried the torch he'd dropped. "You could have destroyed us." "Never the point," I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. And sometimes the greatest success isn't in proving them wrong, it's in offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, then maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real, something that couldn't be taken away because it was rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices. And if you're facing a moment like I once did, when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder, just build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will come. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.